Hey, friends. This is Martine Williams, and I am obsessed with all things mompreneur life and helping you to remix your priorities, your habits, your mindsets, and yes, even your relationships so that you can build a successful business without losing yourself in the process. I'm also obsessed with the color turquoise and lyrics of the 80s and 90s, but that's beside the point. Girlfriend, you don't have to hustle 24/7, 365 and continue to sacrifice your health, your relationships, and your sanity to be a successful mompreneur. As a small town girl living in a lonely world to a six-figure mompreneur, I am here to teach you how. There is a better way, and this podcast is your one-stop shop for all of the how-tos, the encouragement, the life hacks, the success tips, and of course, a little side of tough love. This is the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. So let's do this. Hey, friends. It's Martine Williams, your host of the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. So excited to have you here today. Really excited for you to hear this Turquoise Talk episode today. I think you'll find it refreshing and some really good take-home tips for career burnout and building a business, just all the things. Just a really, really fruitful conversation with my Turquoise Talk guest, Suzanne Monroe. So let me tell you a little bit about Suzanne. She is the founder of the International Association of Wellness Professionals and director of the IAWP's Holistic Wellness Coach Certification and Training Program. After experiencing career burnout herself in conjunction with a family health crisis, Suzanne had a wake-up moment that led her to discover her passion for holistic wellness and her purpose of helping others. Now she aims to help people reawaken their purpose and find a career they love, where last year alone, she helped reach 11.5 million people with the message of holistic wellness and living a life you love. She is also the author of Live Well, Dream Big, the ultimate guide to becoming your best self and living the life on your own terms, and the podcast host of Live Well, Dream Big. And I really wish you could have seen her face when she talked about the work that she does through IAWP and helping other people. Her face just lit up. And you know that she's living in her passions and her purpose and her gifts. And so I'm excited for you to hear from her. So without further ado, let's do this. Well, welcome back, friends, to the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. I am excited about today's episode. We have a Turquoise Talk guest, with most of you know by now, that is just giving you the opportunity to hear from other mompreneurs, other experts on the topics of mompreneur life, priorities, boundaries, all the things that we discuss pretty regularly here on this podcast. So I'm super excited to welcome Suzanne Monroe to the podcast today. Thank you so much, Suzanne, for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Martine. I'm super excited to connect with you and be on the show. So
it's awesome. And you will all probably quickly pick up the difference in accents that I have and that Suzanne has. So it's really funny. Like, this is our first time actually talking to each other before we started this recording. And I'm sure she instantly picked up my Southern accent. And I definitely picked up her Wisconsin accent. But I love that we are able to connect with people all over the world, and podcasts has definitely been one of my biggest mentors, or people that I listen to on podcasts. And so for those who don't know you, and I'm just getting to know you too, tell us a little bit about you, your family, and how or why you became a mompreneur. What's your journey?
Oh, great. Thanks. I'd love to share a little bit more. Well, again, I'm Suzanne Monroe. I'm the founder of the International Association of Wellness Professionals. And the main thing we do over there is we train and certify holistic wellness coaches. But you could have never told me this is what I would be doing when I grew up someday. I don't think this job actually existed. I'm sure you can relate, Martine. It's
yes.
So funny to kind of think back to that. But I live in Wisconsin in a little town called Cedarburg, and I'm married and I have an 11-year-old son, and I'll share a little bit more maybe about them as we go along. But, like I said, I never could have imagined this is what I've be doing today. And in fact, I went through this whole career burnout struggle. I suffered from career burnout, not only when I was working in a company, but also as an entrepreneur. So I think there's a lot of things that people might take away from that today. But I was one of those kids who, really was always asking the question, what do I want to be when I grow up? And I mean, it's funny because my son doesn't really think about that much. And I think, kids, they kind of either just go with the flow or they have the answer or, they ultimately find their path. And I really never felt like I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. Even as I got older and then I ended up in college, I was still like, shouldn't I know by now? I still don't know. And because I didn't know, I basically followed the path that was set out before me. I followed the formula that my parents had followed and that they taught me to follow, which was you go to a good school, you get good grades, and you get a good job. And that is the path. That's the path to success. That's what you do. That's happiness and you're done. So, that's what I did. Yeah. I followed that path. Only when I got there, it didn't turn out to be all it was cracked up to be. And I wasn't happy and I didn't feel like I was successful. And I ultimately faced career burnout. And I can share more about that story. But I think it's interesting because we all have sort of these paths that oftentimes kind of get put before us and we just kind of follow them blindly. Right. And we think we're going to get there and all is going to work out. And that's not exactly what happened.
No. And I love that. And that's definitely one of the questions that I ask each guest that comes on because burnout is such an epidemic. And I think it's become this accepted way of life, especially for moms and mompreneurs and entrepreneurs as a whole, is this hustle pace that we're supposed to sustain, and it's not sustainable. So how did your burnout how did it show itself? Because everyone's different a little bit on how burnout, presents itself. And then how did you work your way out of that? Can you kind of share that with us?
I think, back to that story where I landed my first job out of college, I was working for this fast-paced consulting firm. And I think I was on the fast track to burnout because within the first few weeks of my job, I noticed that my coworkers were sleeping under their desks. And at the time, because it was my first job, I'm thinking, is this the norm? Is this what happens in a, successful career? And of course, there were other stories. I once saw my boss in his pajama pants as he was on his way to brush his teeth in the morning. He had spent the night at the office. Totally embarrassing. And, I never spent the night at the office or slept under my desk, but that was kind of what it felt like the company culture was. That was kind of the expectation. And ultimately, I found myself a couple of years into this position, just really facing burnout. I mean, I had low energy. I look back now because I'm someone in the holistic health and wellness space. I was eating tons of sugar. I was using caffeine to kind of keep me going. But I landed this project where I was in Argentina because I spoke Spanish as well. So I was flying around internationally, and which sounded glamorous, but no, it really added to the career burnout. And, you were expected to stay up, all night actually working on a client's project. And so there I was. I didn't have the pajamas, but I was in the, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And it was the third night, I finally put my head down on the desk and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And my team was like, oh, okay. And I was like, no, guys, the next morning, I'm like,
for real.
I not only cannot do this project anymore, I can't do this job anymore. And I can't do this lifestyle anymore, And so I kind of got out of that position. I found myself actually in other positions as well, where I was still facing career burnout. And I realized no one's coming to save me, right? Because I was blaming it on the culture. I was blaming it on my boss. I was blaming it on my coworkers. And I realized I had to make a change and do something else. And, fast forward, I ultimately decided to become an entrepreneur. But I will say this, and we can talk more about this, is that I thought, just changing my corporate suit for my comfy yoga pants, which I'm wearing now, are, this would be the path to ending burnout. But I also faced burnout again as an entrepreneur and in my new, version of myself. So my point here is it's not always the external forces. Oftentimes it's our own habits and our own internal things that are going on that we really need to learn how to adjust and really kind of take accountability for that.
Right. Because we can take unhealthy behaviors into any position or any stage of life. If we have those unhealthy mindsets and behaviors, they can just travel along with us and have that, that baggage that we carry with us. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that transition from corporate to entrepreneurship, because I know there may be some people who are thinking about making that transition, and maybe it is because of burnout, maybe it's because of lack of passion, or they just want to, you talk about aligning your life. Maybe just where they're at right now is not in alignment with where they want to go or the lifestyle they're trying to build for themselves and their families. So can you share a little bit about that transition? I actually just went through that transition, left a 15-year career. Actually, this time last year, I was in the middle, in the throes of having those hard conversations with myself, with my loved ones, and with those that it was going to impact. And it's not easy. It's really difficult, but I know it was what I was called and needed to do next. So that was a long question to ask you, but just that transition. Can you share a little about that journey for you?
Yeah. And first I'll just say congratulations to you, because a lot of people are like, oh, you left your job, or if you get fired, or they're like, oh no, or whatever. And I'm like, congratulations. Because I know, the feeling, like it can be scary, it can be exciting, but like you're really stepping into a new path, and it really does come back to alignment, like you said. And I think sometimes when you're stuck in a career you don't love, or you're, really struggling with where you are, it's kind of hard to say, what is that transition? How do I make that next step? Mm-hmm. And for me, that formula where I went to go to get good grades, go to a good school, and get a good job, I had to start to really determine a new formula. Right. Because I think we all have these kind of things in our minds that tell us this is the way it has to be. Right. And I realized that in order to get in alignment, and really to get in alignment with my soul's purpose, my soul's work, I had to start looking at things a little bit differently. I now have, looking back, I ended up creating a new formula, and it's really simple. It's just matching up your natural talents with your passion and your story. Okay. So let me just kind of give an example of this. Your natural talents are basically, the things that you're just really good at, the things that people say to you.
Right.
Wow, Martine, you're an amazing interviewer, wouldn't think you were going to be doing a podcast, or whatever it is. You have these things that people have probably told you your whole life that you're really good at, but you don't even realize it, So those are your natural talents, and you probably have several of them. And then you've got your passion. And sometimes people say, well, what's my passion? And this is where I think you can just like spend hours passing away time doing something, and you're like 4 hours goes by and you're like, what the heck just happened? Right. Because you're so immersed in it. And then, of course, the real key here is matching those things up with your personal journey and your story, especially if you really want to become an entrepreneur, because I think the personal journey and the story is so huge to creating that alignment. Right. And so just as an example of my talents, passion, and story, so people can kind of see how this comes together, because it sounds like, okay, great formula, but how does this really work out? My natural talents, and I like to say I have many of them, but one of my natural talents was actually taking information and creating systems. I know that sounds kind of like really weird, but that was something I was really good at. But it was kind of hard to uncover, because it's just how my brain works.
It seems ordinary, right? You're thinking this is just ordinary. Everybody has this. No, they don't.
And then, of course, my passion really became about holistic wellness. And this really became my passion because my husband at the time was diagnosed with an incurable illness. And this was back when I was in that corporate job and I was experiencing that career burnout. And we went to the doctors and they said, sorry, there's not much you can do here. Your life is just going to go downhill from here. And I was like, that just doesn't sound right. And so because we didn't find the answers kind of the traditional way, we had to go looking in other areas, and we got into natural health and holistic wellness. And fast forward over 20 years later, he's doing well, he's doing great. Awesome. So the point there was that really ignited this personal passion for me. It became so huge, right? Because he changed his life, I changed my life, and we saw the impact that it had. Still, though, I was like, what the heck am I going to do with that? Right. And then I realized that, my story, what was my story really about? My story for me was, again, about changing that formula and really about carving my own path and creating kind of this lifestyle of freedom, because I was always told, like, that's not possible, right? You've got to follow this other path. And so when I saw that, hey, if you don't follow the health path that they say you have to do, things might work out. I started applying that to my career. I thought, well, what if that works over here too? Right. And so I really had to show myself that it was possible. And that's how I ended up taking the leap to say, I'm going to follow my passion for health and wellness. I'm going to become a coach. I'm going to start my own business and become an entrepreneur, because I desperately wanted to prove to myself that I could carve my own path and create success, and that formula was not the truth. And so all those things really came together. And of course, now many years later, I am the founder of the International Association of Wellness Professionals. But the thing is, what we do there is teach other people how to carve their own path, to define their own version of success using our systems and helping people with holistic wellness. So those are how all my things came together. And it sounds kind of weird, but you can see how that formula can really help you. And of course, if you start using the formula, it may not work right away. It takes time, right? It's a journey. Yeah. But the elements are all there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think there are people that are listening like, God, that sounds amazing. Like, what a beautiful journey that she has had. And now she's, successful, and she reframed her mind and her formula. But we know there's messes before the success. And I think it's really important for mompreneurs to understand that it wasn't a perfect journey for you. It's still not a perfect journey for you or for me. And so what were some of those messes along the way as you were making that transition? Like what were some lessons maybe you wish you would have known, or things you would have known before you kind of made that transition?
I love that question. And like I said, just because I changed my corporate suit for yoga pants, I was like, woohoo, you have the high going for a couple of months, like, yay. And then all of a sudden the dark night of the soul comes, which is absolutely what happened. Because even though you take the leap to follow your passion, it absolutely doesn't mean things are going to work out perfectly. In fact, I love what you said, the mess before success. And frankly, there's always new messes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it does get pretty messy. And in fact, that's why I think going on the path to follow your passion and purpose in life and really carve your own path and become an entrepreneur is the greatest personal self-growth journey you will ever go on. Yeah. And the reason is, right, because, and you know this, Martine, you're saying yes, basically to the universe or however you want to call it. You're saying yes to yourself and this big possibility, right? And as soon as you say yes, all the things are going to show up that are going to help push you there, but they're also going to cause some of those challenges and those messes so that you actually can work through them, right? And so when I took that leap, yeah, things were starting to go well, but on the same note, things were also very fragile. And I ended up wearing a lot of hats as an entrepreneur, as I'm sure most of your mompreneurs can relate, right? I thought, oh, here I am being the coach doing what I love, and I'm going out, I'm teaching classes and workshops. Well, don't forget, you also have to be in marketing. You have to be in sales. You have to be the accountant. You have to be the bookkeeper. All of a sudden you have to become a tech wizard, right? And ultimately, I ended up facing burnout again. Yeah. And I found myself laying in bed one morning and I couldn't get out of bed. And I later found out I had not only shingles, which can come from having a stress response, but later I was diagnosed with adrenal fatigue. And I'll tell you what, Martine, I felt like a total fraud because here I was helping other people with their own health and wellness, and I couldn't even get out of bed and I had adrenal fatigue. So I was like, okay, something is not right here. But worse yet, the real challenge was not only was I wearing all these hats, I was even wondering, like, how am I actually going to pay the bills? So the dark night of the soul was like, am I going back to get that 9-to-5 job? Or am I going to make this work? And you can see what choice I decided to make, but I had to fully recommit at that point and say, I'm going to make this work no matter what it takes. And I went on another journey at that point as an entrepreneur to really dive into everything that was super important, right? I needed to really understand how to be the best coach. I needed to know how to be an entrepreneur and really run my business. But I also needed to know how to do this in an authentic way, in a conscious way, in a sustainable way, because I was seeing lots of information out there, but it didn't always resonate with who I was. And I think that's super important for entrepreneurs, right? You have to find what resonates with you because there's so many different options out there. And sometimes you just start following all these things out there, but you've got to find the path that's right for you. I think that's really, really important. And you got to match that back up to your talents and your passion and your story.
Right. And there's so much information out there for entrepreneurs to do that this way. Like you said, marketing, and it is really important to find the people that align with your values and where you want to head, and those that are not just telling you what to do, but they're actually doing it as well. And they're finding success in that. I just really felt led to ask you this question as you're, lying in bed and you have adrenal fatigue and you're kind of at that breaking point. I know there's someone listening. I know there'll be someone who listens to this episode and that's where she's at. What was like the first thing you did just to get yourself out of the bed? Because it is really hard to be in that place. I've been there. And I think we have to get up and then boil the ocean again. And it's just taking that first 2 or 3 steps. Like, what was the first 2 or 3 steps you took to kind of reverse that burnout and get out of it?
I kind of think back to that moment. And I think one of it was really just having acceptance for where I was, because on the path of burnout, oftentimes we're just like pushing, right? We just keep going, even though we're feeling the signs, we're feeling the symptoms. We know internally that this is not sustainable. We're not on the right path. And when you get to that point of total rock bottom, that's really all you can do is fully accept it. I mean, you can say, hey, I'm not going to accept this and I'm going to try to, push through it or whatever. But if you fully accept it, I think that's where like the big possibilities come, because you can say, this isn't really working for me anymore and I have to find a new path. And then the other thing is I got support, right? I think I pretty much immediately called a friend of mine who was really a coach and a support, and really, just to have that support. Because again, I think on this journey, whether we're just as women who are trying to do it all, whether we're on the burnout journey and we want to get off it, or whether we've already taken that leap to become an entrepreneur, we oftentimes don't ask for support. Right. We think we have to have it all together. And that support piece is so, so huge because you don't want to go the journey alone. And having the support makes, I think, all the difference. And so support is one of my favorite things.
Yeah, we weren't intended to do life alone, and we have to have that support. I think it is really hard for people to ask for help because you think it makes us weak. I think it shows a huge amount of courage and strength to ask for that help. And the more women I think are vulnerable as you're being right now to really share that you did struggle and that you don't have it all together, and to be on the other side of that struggle and to see how happy and alignment and joy-filled work that you're doing, it just gives so many other women hope. And so much inspiration to no matter where they are on that path, if they're in the burnout, on the way in the burnout, or on the way out. Like, it's just the more we take off the mask and really share with other women, hey, I'm not okay, but I'm not going to stay that way. I'm going to make some changes. It just gives more women that confidence to do the same. So thank you for being willing to kind of share some of that. So of all your accomplishments, what would you say you're most proud of right now? It sounds like you've accomplished a lot. I mean, just those 2 big seasons of burnout, that's a lot.
And honestly, that seems so long ago too. And I just want to comment on what you said too. It's like, yeah, taking the mask off and saying even where I am today, and the work that I'm doing today, while you change those habits and patterns and you learn so much about yourself, I don't think they ever completely go away. Some of it's our DNA, how we approach the world, right? So I have to still constantly check in with myself so that I don't end up going back on that burnout path. Right. Yeah, and so I think those moments still come for me sometimes where even just last week, I was like, oh my gosh, I really need a break. And the difference is now is that you just have the awareness because you know how bad it can get and you're not willing to go there, but it doesn't mean that all the things coming at you really change. It doesn't mean that the stressors actually go away. It's really how you're starting to respond can be different, but you know what? You still make mistakes and you still go too far. And then you're like, oh gosh, I did it again. Right. So, I'm always most proud of all of the coaches in our community because I'm really just watching them as they go on a similar journey that I went on, where they decided to carve their own path and get out there in the world and start sharing their unique messages and doing it in a way that's, again, really in alignment with them. And I mean, every day I just wake up and it's so amazing for me to just hear their stories, see what they're doing, and really watching just the huge impact that they're having, going out, helping other people, using the systems that we teach, through our training program. And it's, to me, that's really what keeps me going every day. It's really what fuels me and fulfills me. And I think for every entrepreneur out there, you've got to find that one thing that really does kind of fill you up, right? Because again, you might wear different hats and there's going to be things that are happening. But if you really have that big why, that thing that really just lights you up, I think that is so huge, right? Because it gives that purpose and meaning to what you're doing. And so that's what I'd say.
If y'all could see the smile on her face and how she's shining when you're talking about that, you can definitely tell that is what you're most proud of. I mean, you're just gleaming when you talk about it. And I mean, isn't that what life is all about? Is, the struggles, I believe our past struggles become our present purposes. And so the things you've gone through and that you've come through, now you're helping other people not only go through it themselves, but you're giving them the framework to help other people go through the same thing. So this this huge domino effect of what you went through and how you've made it through it. And now you're helping others. And I think that's just congratulations, huge bravo to you for not just keeping it to yourself, and to being willing to train up others to help people in that area of their life. So what does a typical day look like for you? What's your routine, your schedule? Are you everything is scheduled out to a T? I kind of feel like you are probably very scheduled and regimented just from our little bit of time together. Do you have a team of people that are helping you? What's kind of the behind the scenes of a typical day for you?
Well, that's a good question. Okay, I'll give you kind of my ideal perfect day and then how it really goes. Okay, because most days I'm really focused. I really do want to get up, and today I did a meditation. I always have to do something kind of mindful type practice that's really important for me just to kind of open up my day and really get centered. I also have to get some movement, and we were talking before we started recording that there's snow outside my window right now, and I'm it's kind of cold out, but no matter what it's like out, I have to get outside and just get some movement and kind of take in that fresh air. There's something about it that's so grounding. And if I don't do it, I actually see it impacts the rest of my day, right? I don't get that sun in my face. I don't get that light in my eyes. And I think it's really huge. So I do some of these mindfulness and different practices because even though I say to myself, oh, I don't really have time, again, it leads back to burnout, right? If you aren't doing these things and really putting yourself first, the day's just going to go by, as you know, Martine. There's always more to do.
Always.
So those are kind of some of my opening rituals. I also have what I call closing rituals. They're kind of like these end caps to the day where I try to do the same thing because I'm also a mother, right? And, all of a sudden your end of the day comes and you could just switch right into mom mode. But I find when I do that and I switch right into mom mode, I don't show up the way that I really want to be. So I need to have some of these closing rituals. And again, it can be even just like 5 or 10 minutes where you're creating that transition from one role to the next, right? Because we're all kind of wearing these different hats. And so those are kind of some of the closing things. But in the middle of the day, yes, I mean, for sure, one of my big practices are what I call task blocks. So this is really about scheduling time to work on kind of those big rocks, those big things that you have in your bucket rather than all the small to-dos. And I'll tell you what, I am like a to-do person because I would love to just cross everything off the checklist and I will feel accomplished, right? But I know that working on the bigger projects is really what's more meaningful to me. It really what continues to move things forward. And it's really where I need to be focusing my time and energy. So I have to consciously schedule in the bigger, more important things within like my work and of course with family as well. And then I find that all those little things usually end up working out or you find out, you really didn't need to do them. So those are some of the things I do. But yes, I'm honored and proud to have an amazing team supporting the work that we do at the IAWP, supporting our community. So it really allows me now, when I first started my entrepreneur story, as I said, almost 20 years ago, I was wearing all those different hats and I really was kind of a solo show. And so now I'm just so grateful to be, in a different place. But what it allows me to do is really show up and do what I love to do best, right? So oftentimes coming on to talk to folks like yourself, but also I have my own podcast. I'm doing a lot of events and leading our community. And I'm always really focused on creating different programs and things that are serving our community. So that's where I spend a lot of my time. But you know what? For any entrepreneur, it's like, okay, it's a journey to get there. And I would say the biggest thing you can do is go back to those natural talents and passions and focus on what you do best. And you're still going to have a huge laundry list of everything else you're doing. And you're going to be like, wait, what the heck? But one of the things I did early on is I had that list and I kind of kept track of what do I love to do and what do I not love to do in my business. And then slowly I started seeing where could I get a little more leverage? Where could I get that support? Where could I start to outsource? And it doesn't happen overnight, right? It was a journey, but just by having the awareness of what do I want to do versus what I don't want to do, even if I have to do those things now, it gave me a vision for where I was going. And slowly by slowly, I was able to build that team and get that support over time.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up because as you were talking and that it's almost like you were reading my mind of the next question I was going to ask you because people see, okay, 20 years, right? You've been in business for 20 years. And so many people, we want to be where you are and have that full team, that full support system. And I think it's really important for you to share what you just did, that it is a journey. But I don't know if you agree with this. A lot of times we need to invest in that help before you think you're ready or before you think you can afford it to get to that next level. That's what I have found in my personal experience, whether it was hiring a coach, going to being a part of a mastermind group, whatever it was that was going to help me get to the next level. It's always scary to make that first investment when you're like, where is this money going to come from? So can you speak to that just a little bit for someone who's thinking, well, that sounds great and fun. She's got all these people helping her, but I can't even afford to have someone come in and clean my house right now. And that could really remove some stuff from her so she could focus on her business a little bit. But that was my first hire and I have not turned back from that. And as soon as I started making money, it was the first thing I was going to do was hire someone to help, clean the home. And I'm so thankful for them.
Yeah. And I so love that you asked that question. Back to that, dark night of the soul where I was laying there, I found out I had adrenal fatigue. I also had very little money in my bank account. So when I made the decision, am I going to go back to the 9-to-5 job or am I going to go forward? I had to take that leap and it required me making some serious investments in myself and going into some serious debt. And that sounds like really scary to people, but I knew that I was that committed and that was the only way I was going to be able to get to where I wanted to go. And so it was super scary for sure. Right. And so you don't have to go that crazy and you don't have to go into debt, but you have to make small investments, whatever that looks like for you. And I love that you said, you have the support of someone who's caring for your home, because to some people they say, well, that's a luxury, but it's really not, because you know that your talents and passion are doing something very specific every day. And if you're filling up with all of the to-dos out there, you don't get to do that. So you really have to focus on how you can shine and serve at the highest level. But I get it. It doesn't happen overnight. And that's why I say make that list, because even if you can't do it now, if you're committed to this journey of following your passion and really sharing your gifts, you're going to get there step by step. And then you said that too, it's like, it's a journey kind of small steps, right? So we always have that. I guess the way I like to think of it is we always have that big vision out there, and you can get excited by the vision, or you can get overwhelmed by the vision saying, that's so grandiose. Like, is that ever going to happen for me? If you leave it as something wonderful that is possible for you, then you start breaking things down into smaller steps.
Right.
So,
it's not as overwhelming. Yeah. It's not as overwhelming when you break it down like that.
And a lot of this has to do with, like you said, so there's this idea of the small steps, investing in ourselves. But most of us were never taught that investing in ourselves is something, we should do, especially as women, and I see this so often with people who actually need the support of a coach, but they're like, oh, I couldn't, invest in coaching for myself. Could I? And probably once you start doing it and you see that it's not a luxury, but it's actually fundamental for what you're here to do, you start to change your own mindset around what support means to you. And so to me, like, my favorite thing to invest in now is support if I have the opportunity to do so, right? Because
absolutely,
it's tied to so much more. And it's tied to really the impact that you're making out there. And it's really tied to you changing other people's lives. So if you think it's about self-serving to yourself, that's where that mindset shift comes, that it's actually about how you're going to serve and show up and help others. And when you start to see that it actually is that great, then you can find ways to make it happen.
Yeah. I always tell people, if you struggle with delegating, just do the first one or two. And then it's like you become a queen of it because you see that it frees you up to, like you said, really play in your strengths and do the things that you're called to do, and the things that really matter most. And I constantly keep a list, even now, of the things, okay, is this something I have to do, or is it something that someone else can do so that I can do my best work and do my most important work? And that's ongoing, because business is ever changing. There's always lots of opportunities, lots of things we can fill our calendars with, but let's keep the main things, and provide opportunities for other people to shine in their strengths by coming alongside you and supporting you. I think that's really an important point to bring as well. Like, I love the people that come. Tuesday's my favorite day of the week because my house smells amazing. And I tell them every day, I'm so thankful for you, because you allow me to spend more time with my kids, spend more time with my husband. I'm not spending my Saturdays dusting off, the tables and, vacuuming and all of those things. But other people, like my mother-in-law, she says cleaning is her therapy. It's hilarious. I'm like, well, you go, girl, with your therapy. I'm gonna delegate my therapy out to someone else.
That's hilarious. But that actually is true. Like, you have to find your thing. Like, we all have things that we need to do to have our own therapy, right? To really have that downtime. And it might show up in the form of cleaning, right? Or it might show up. Mine has showed up in the form of gardening. And I'm just going to tell you, I'm not like your typical person who would garden. Like, I started gardening because I was like, hey, I really want to have organic, healthy food right outside my door. I think it's an eco-friendly thing to do. And I really want to get into this, but it really has become a kind of therapy. And it's like, just having your hands in the dirt is, I don't know, there's something about it, right? Where other people will be like, no, I don't want to do it. So I think we all have these things, and it is super important, right? Because we're living in such a digital, fast-paced world right now that we do have to find those other things that are not digital whatsoever, because I think from that place, that's where we find these little moments. We get these little, I always say I'm actually working too, because that's where I seem to get my best ideas, when I'm not actually in front of the computer, when I'm doing something completely different. So I think it's super important. And
that's awesome. Awesome. So tell me, if you had a chance, I like to ask every guest this question as well. If you had a chance to talk to all the mompreneurs just for a few minutes, what's the one thing you would want to make sure they understood?
Wow. One of my favorite quotes out there that I recently saw is, nothing changes if nothing changes. Okay. I think we all want things to happen. We want to evolve. We see other people out there. We go on social media. We think, oh, so-and-so has an amazing life, or we hear people telling us things that we should do. And again, it really comes back to ourselves. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And that really means we have to be willing to kind of change ourselves and always come back to ourselves and trust ourselves and really start there. It's really easy, I think, to look outside of ourselves, to listen to all the other voices out there. But until we start really listening to ourselves, I think that's really where the gold is, that it's really going to guide us on the next path that we're meant to be on. So what I would encourage everybody to like carve out those times, and even just, I say, hit the pause button again, whether it's for those end caps to your day, whether it's for 5 minutes, whether it's for 10 minutes, because if we're running on autopilot all the time, or if we're in our own business and we're like, even if we're sharing our gifts and we're helping other people, we have to have these moments where we come back to what is our truth and what's going to guide us to what we really need to do next. To me, that's been really huge in my own journey.
Love it. That is so awesome. I actually think there's an episode on this podcast. That's the title, Nothing Changes If Nothing Changes. So I love that. So y'all have to go and search and see that. I'm sure we talked about all of those things, but thank you for bringing that, because I do think that is super important. Okay. So what are you excited about right now in the season that you're in? It could be personally, it could be professionally, like share a little bit about what you're excited about.
Well, I am really excited because right now I am working to create a second book, and it's going to be coming out in the new year. So I can't direct you to what it's called or where it is, because it's all still being worked out. But I'm really excited because I think it really is for mompreneurs for sure, or people who really want to follow their passion in life. And it's really about the tools and the path to get there. And you know what it really comes down to is it's about following your path, not someone else's. And for so long, I was trying to follow someone else's version of success, right? First, it was my parents' formula. Then it was, the corporations I was working for. And then even when I became an entrepreneur, I was trying to follow these other versions of success. And it's really not about following someone else's path. It's about really discovering what yours is, right? Because that is what's going to guide you to, again, to the next thing that's happening for you. And I always say, don't contort yourself to fit into someone else's version of you or into someone else's box. I think so often that's what we're doing.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's coming out. That's really exciting. And then I would say kind of another fun new thing that we have is called the Career Superpower Quiz. And this could be really great for anyone who's listening, who's either burned out in a current career, whether you're working, another job and you're trying to build your business, or you've already making the leap to full-time mompreneur. This is something that's going to help you to get kind of clear on those talents that we're talking about and how to apply them to the work that you do every day, so that you really can find almost the right business model for you, right? And make sure you're playing to your strengths. And people can go over to superpowergift.com to take the quiz. They'll get their unique profile for their career superpower. And I'll say this, one of the things I love about discovering your career superpower is it doesn't just play out in what you do with your work every day. It impacts your relationships, it impacts your health, it impacts your life, it impacts everything. So it's kind of fun. And that's a great next step for people too.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. We'll put all those links in the show notes so they can check that out. And then you'll just have to circle back with me when your book comes out, and we'll definitely maybe have you back on the podcast to talk about the book. So for those who don't know about, it's IAWP, right? That's your certification and your company. Can you share I'm sure there's a lot to that, and I'm going to definitely share more of that in the show notes too, but can you just share out of your heart and from your mouth, what is IAWP and what all do you do over there?
Well, again, the IAWP stands for the International Association of Wellness Professionals. I ultimately created the IAWP because as I went on that journey when I became an entrepreneur, I realized that there wasn't really a community at the time for people like me. There wasn't really a community of people that wanted to kind of follow their own path within coaching, passionate about holistic wellness. And I realized I had to create my own community. So that's kind of how it was born. Today we really have kind of like 3 guiding philosophies. The first is transformation, not information. And this really ties into some of the things we talked about today, Martine, but there's so much information out there about how to live your life, about how to end your burnout, about how to be well. And, you can dive into all that information, but a lot of those things are just putting a Band-Aid on burnout or a Band-Aid on your challenges. And this is really about transformation, is really coming from discovering what really works for you and knowing that the same thing that works for you, Martine, is different than what works for me. And this really ties into one of our systems called Wellness 360, which is this whole interconnected holistic wellness system where you get to discover what works for you around your career and your life and your health. And then the other philosophy we teach is be the guide, not the guru, which also ties into some of the things we were talking about today about really trusting yourself and learning to coach yourself. And of course, learning to coach others. And again, it goes back to there's a lot of other people out there kind of saying what you should do, but we have to kind of go into our own inner wisdom, as I like to call it. Yeah. And so this can be something really supportive for yourself. If you really are working on growing yourself personally, to be your own guide and find your own inner guru, really. Right. This ties into our second system, which is our core coaching method. And then our third system is our coach launch system. And it's really based around the philosophy, again, of following your path, not someone else's, that we give people this system and this framework and all of the support behind it, but they discover their own path to doing it. And again, it's an individual journey.
Right. Awesome. Well, again, we will put all the links to things so you can go and check out more information on Suzanne and everything she has to offer. And just some rapid fire questions to ask every guest is, what is your favorite business resource that you're using right now? Like, it could be an app. It could be an app. It could be like a CRM. Like, what's your favorite thing that you're using right now for your business?
Okay, that is such a good question. I'm more thinking of all the apps and things that people on my team use. I'm like, guys, what's your favorite right now? I'm so blessed right now because I've like really been able to kind of focus back onto my genius of really like working with systems and things like that. And creating all the things that I get to create. But, I think you mentioned CRM. I'll just say like CRMs, I think are really important for people, anyone who is in business. I've seen so many coaches as well as other entrepreneurs kind of try to piecemeal things together. And if we're talking about investments, probably one of the first investments you really should make is into a CRM system so that you really have, I like to call it a home for your business. It's really your home where you get to connect with people and also keep things organized so that you don't go back into burnout. You don't go into overwhelm. So I'm stealing your answer for this one. I think having a CRM system is probably one of the first things you want to do.
Okay. Awesome. And what about a book? What's your favorite book that you've read or that you're reading right now? Do you read? I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do.
I'm like, wait, what's on my nightstand right now? One of the things I'm really committed to doing is always reading the books of anybody I interview on my podcast, which is Live Well, Dream Big. And everybody has kind of a wellness journey. Something happened to them, kind of similar to me. Something happened where, in their life and they had a health challenge. They had to go on a different path to figure out what it was. And that it inspired them so much that they went on to basically dream big. And so right now I've got a pile of different people who have their own live well, dream big journeys that I get to interview. And I'm thinking right now of Dr. Lissa Rankin, who wrote Sacred Medicine. She is a doctor who ended up having some health challenges that she was on like all these different medications. And she realized, okay, I've been doing the traditional healthcare thing. I'm a doctor, but there might be more to the story. And she kind of went on this globe-trotting thing around the entire world and connected with traditional healers and ancient healers and traditional, health people. It's really kind of a fun book. So anything in that topic is usually something on my read list.
Awesome. And what is the other thing? Oh, do you have a favorite quote?
Yes, I actually do. I have a favorite quote and I'm wondering, can I actually say it? Okay. It's by Howard Thurman. And he says, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And I think that's such an important message, hopefully for everybody listening today. It's like, right now, you may be doing a lot of things that don't make you feel alive. You may feel like you have to be doing them, but start focusing in on the things that actually do make you feel alive and go do that.
That's like one of my top 5 quotes. So I love that. We're in sync.
Okay. What do you do?
Yes. And lastly, what do you do just for you? Like when you've taken your business hat off, your mom hat, your wife, like what do you do that just fills your cup? I used to mention gardening. Is that it? Or is there something else?
Yeah, I'm going to go a step further and I'm going to say, you're going to think I'm like really crazy. I'm going to say composting. Okay. Because composting is one of those things I'm like way too busy to do. But if I actually like allow it to be a little part of what I do every day, there's something about it. And it's just really simple. People make it out to be this really difficult thing. It's really, just composting is, so you're not adding to landfills. But the thing that's kind of a ritual for me is like going out to my garden, kind of putting my compost, in the compost bucket. But then there's something where I've really been tapping in lately into like just tapping into like all the nature around us. Recently, I walked around my entire yard. I've got all different types of trees. I know nothing about the trees. And I discovered, you can use one of those little apps. You can find out what the tree is. I like identified all of the trees, and then I was like, ooh, and I kind of looked up the meaning about each of the trees, and there was something about it. So what it comes down to when there's time just for me, again, I just get out kind of in the natural world, and it allows me to kind of be in awe and realize that everything that's happening out there is actually like possible for us, right? Nature is always growing. Right now, we lost all the leaves on our trees, right? And then it started snowing. It's like there's this cycle that's always happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I realize that it's always happening to us too. And it's really a great reminder that nothing really kind of lasts forever. Things always change. So if you're struggling right now in any way, like this time is going to pass. And it's being shown to you right now outside your window. It will pass. And you can really lead that change by just taking the next step in front of you.
Love it. Well, that was a great note to end on. So thank you so much, Suzanne, for coming on the show. This was amazing. I know that people are going to be writing all kinds of notes. Hopefully people will go to your website and check everything out that you offer and how you can maybe help them. We'll put all the links in there for you guys. And thank you again so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. This was amazing. And
it was.
Hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, it was awesome. All right, friends. Well, I will catch you on the next episode, and just know I'm believing in you always. Well, that's a wrap, friends, for this week's episode of the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. Thank you so much for listening and for following the show. It means so much to me. And listen, friend, sharing is caring. So if you loved this episode and thought of some fellow mompreneurs who could benefit, send them the link. Share this episode or take a screenshot and head on over to Instagram and share and tag me at Martine31Williams. We are connected on Instagram, right? It's where you will get all the fun behind the scenes of my life and business as a mompreneur. Until next time, know that I am believing in you always.